Hello and welcome to the Sensual Being podcast with myself, your host, Jolene Whiting. I have been a pole dance teacher for nearly 20 years. I'm also a yoga instructor, and my favourite pastimes are connecting to my own sensuality, connecting with the world, and connecting with animals as well. In this podcast, you'll find new and inventive ways of how you see yourself, connecting yourself with others, and also how you see and view the world around you. In this episode, we talk about gossiping and how it lowers our frequency and vibrational energy, and how grudges can really lock us in to a negative way of thinking. Hello and welcome back to the Sensual Being podcast, and thank you as always for spending your time with me today. Our time is so precious and so valuable, and we never want to lose sight of that. And before we get into this episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much again for some lovely feedback that I've been having. There's more ratings and reviews on this podcast, which is just incredible. So thank you so much. I'm so glad that a lot of you are connecting with my words and my wisdom, and add to your own wisdom by my thoughts and insights. And just remember, as always, you don't have to take on every single thing I say, because you will know what works for you, and it's meeting each other where we are right now in our lives, because we are all in different places within our lives, within ourselves, our state of being, and that is ever changing, ever growing, and ever evolving. But if you can take on what works for you and leave the other bits, you might find that you take them on at a different stage, or you don't at all, which is absolutely fine. It's about sharing our stories and our ideas with each other to actually create a better world for each other. That's what it's all about. And as you know, for me, it's not about stats. I try really hard to not to get sucked into that, because oh god, our life is full of how many followers, how many likes, how many comments, oh god, so many. But actually that doesn't matter. What matters is this reaching people, the connection. So you could argue that stats do play a little role in this, but I try not to look at them, because I don't want to base any of my self-worth on it. But the plus is that if you rate or review this, it gets seen by more people. Spotify deems it then as something, oh, people want to see it, therefore it sends it out to more people, which that is what it's all about, in the sense of connecting and reaching people. So thank you so much for all the ratings and reviews, and even just the feedback in person has just been phenomenal, and I absolutely love it. People come to me and they say, oh, do you know what, since you said this, I've been thinking this, have you thought about that? And this is great. It creates conversation and dialogue, and again, that's the point. I don't want us to be quiet. I don't want you to be quiet, and I certainly do not want to be quiet. I feel like I've been quiet for too long. So, today's episode is about gossiping. Now, this is very much stereotypically deemed as a woman thing. You know, women get together and gossip and bitch about somebody behind somebody's back. And this can lead to a very judgmental attitude and very low frequency as well. So it kind of, who feels good from gossiping? I know over the years, I really don't. I feel like it's sneaky and snidey. And I feel like, well, if we wouldn't say it to their face, I don't know why it has to be said at all. If you say it to their face and you try and resolve something, that's different. But to literally just bitch about somebody behind their back. But I also feel like this does go back to the witch wound. I can't say that today. So back in the witch burning era, we used to tell on each other, and it was a form of protection to rat somebody out. and to steer clear of certain women, and to, the patriarchal way was to basically set women on each other and against each other rather than working together. This is interesting because it still goes on today. People still think that coming to a pole dancing class is going to be full of all women and full of all women who bitch about each other. Now, I'm not saying that probably isn't true for some places, because different places, different clientele. But in all the nearly 20 years I've been teaching pole dancing, that is just not what we are about. We are about connecting together, empowering each other and ourselves. And that's what it's about. So it's very interesting that, this is still deemed as something that is in our culture today, to get together as women and be against each other. And the sort of camaraderie in the gossip as well, and the people that get sort of brought into it in conversation, when you're chatting in a group and you feel odd if you don't get involved, but you feel dirty when you do, and who wants that sort of feeling dirty? I know I don't. But it's remembering as well that sometimes people need to vent. So the difference, I feel, is if you are venting, it can be normally just after a situation has happened. It's quite raw and it's quite potent. And they might be venting just to get it off their chest. And also, when you vent something out, you work through it as you're talking. So sometimes you don't even need to talk back. You just need to listen. But the venting, I feel, is normally about the situation. Because I've got no time for, the little throwaway comments behind people's back or to their face. If it's a throwaway comment and you don't really mean it, don't say it. It's like the stuff that gets said in the heat of the moment, that cuts and it hurts. And there is no taking it back. It doesn't matter what anybody says. You say those words out loud, they are spells. They have meaning, and we have to remember that. So I've got no time for those sort of throwaway comments, even in anger and in rage. But venting about a situation is normally when a situation is quite raw, emotion is high, the person needs to get it off their chest so that they can let it go and work through it. That to me is venting. Gossiping, however, a lot of the time, this doesn't even have to be situation based. It can be things like, have you noticed she always does this and she always does that, and blah, blah, blah. It's quite vindictive and, like I said before, quite snidey as well, and very judgmental at times. And a lot of the time this stuff is brought up when it doesn't need to be. Like I say, venting has a bit of a purpose, but once that purpose has been served, you move on, like you sort it out, you move away from that situation. But with gossiping, it can be said over and over and over again about the same people over and over and over again. This creates such a low frequency and very low vibration. If you don't know what I mean by vibration and frequency, I think it's episode number 28, where I go into quite a lot of detail on the very rough description of it. Is basically we are made up of over 60% water, and water will vibrate at different levels when you play like sounds or speak, and also frequency with your aura. So if you walk into a room, you can sense there's been an argument, it hangs in the air. So that's a very, very, very short overview of vibration and frequency, but episode 28 explains it a hell of a lot more. So if you're in this kind of low negative spiral energy, it brings you down. It doesn't lift you up. There's no lifting. It brings you down and down and down. It can lead to grudges as well. Now, when you hold a grudge over somebody else, that grudge is controlling you because you haven't let it go. The grudges can even be from things that aren't even real. Somebody just winds you up. You don't even have to know them. Maybe It can even be, I've had this before, where somebody's following me on Instagram and I'm winding them up just by being myself. I'm not trying to wind anyone up. So I know this about them because they've said. So I've gone, okay, well, if you won't unfollow me, I will unfollow you, like have you unfollow me. So I've clicked the button, and then literally within a week, they're following me again. And I think, why are you following me if you really don't like what I put out? This is where we can get trapped in this negative spiral of grudge and gossip. It's almost like we feed on it and we want more of it, more of this negative energy. And they say, was it negative energy loves company or something like that? It does, but also high vibration loves company as well. I mean, those people that are just like, they're really happy, their laugh is really infectious, and you're like, oh, I just want to be around them. They make me feel so good. And they don't even have to do anything to make you feel good. Their presence fills you up. That is the difference. So if you've never really thought about this before, or if you've not thought about it in this way, this is something really to think about. This is where some people who maybe you've been hanging around with all your life, you decide, now maybe they're not really for me anymore because I don't really fit that frequency anymore. And you have to know that this is okay. This is okay. It is okay for you to move through your life and move through different people in the kindest possible way. I'm not talking about just using people, but when we use people, let's not forget that we do that all the time. You know, my partner, I'm with him. I'm using him because I love him. He loves me back and it makes me feel so good. That is a form of use. That's a form of use. And so it's remembering that using somebody is not always a bad thing, because we use people all the time. People come to my classes all the time. They use me because I help them learn pole. It's using. So it's just remembering that. But as we go through our life, we will go through different people. And that's okay. It's like different relationships, like different partners. And that's okay. Like one minute, like your children, you might be their best friend. Like when they're young and they're doing everything with mom or dad. But then as they grow up, they're like, oh, I've got my own friends at school. Check me out. You know, and they're just growing up. But it doesn't mean to say you abolish people. That doesn't have to be the way. But you are allowed to go through your life as seasons and meet different people and connect with different people at different times. So it's forgiving yourself for that as well. Because we are not designed to be friends with everybody all the time, like as in intense relationships all the time. That's not life. We need to move through it. And a lot of people with gossip, have you ever been with somebody and they gossip a hell of a lot and you think, my God, what do they say about me behind my back? Because I tell you something, if they gossip about someone, they'll gossip about you. Because that will be who they are. And a lot of people don't even realize they have this much judgment going on towards somebody else. And it's not your job to make them see it. You can tell them if you feel like that's a worthy conversation to have. But it is not your job. So if you've got a friend who just gossip all the time, and you really want to be friends with them, you can set the boundary and say, look, I'd really prefer if we didn't talk about that person like this, or if you don't talk about that person like that when you're with me. You know, and it's again going back to the venting. If they need to vent about something, that's completely different. But if you're gossiping about the same person over and over again, it's like, what's the point? There is no point to that. There just isn't. Because it's riling the person up and you're saying stuff behind their back. There's just no point. And we'll have a look at gossiping from the sense of, if you feel like, well, what are they saying about me? I'm worried about what other people say about me, what other people think about me. This comes back to something I'm incredibly passionate about, which is inward validation. If you can validate yourself, if you can know that you are turning up in a way that makes you happy and that you feel radiates out in a beautiful and loving way, then it doesn't really matter what anybody else says about you. Because remember, if you are vibrating at a higher frequency. And if you're happier about life, maybe you have more of a positive outlook on life. Maybe things happen and when, oh God, this is an issue, gosh, what am I going to do? You see the opportunity in it and think, okay, it is a bit rubbish right now, but do you know what I can do with this? Because I could do this instead. And if that issue hadn't have arisen, you wouldn't have seen a newer chapter going forwards. So seeing the opportunity in issues and problems as much as possible and as quick as possible, because sometimes shock, drama, it won't happen in that instant. But let that be your way of going forward. Like, well, what's the opportunity in this? Okay, you're not bypassing the feeling and the emotion, you're letting it go through you, but you're like, how can I live going forwards? Now, I'm going to tell you something. People don't like that. They don't like it when you have a positive outlook on life. I have lost friends from having a more positive outlook on life. I've lost friends from doing this podcast. I've lost friends from setting boundaries with them. And it's just part and part. And sometimes that hurts. And sometimes it hurts more. But you have got to bring that validation from within you, because that is what's more important going forwards. What people say behind your back, there will always be people that say stuff behind your back. And you've seen all the famous people, and sometimes you can think, oh, what they do is this person does is amazing. There will always be somebody slagging them off, judging them. So it's remembering that this is what people are like. But you do not have to be around those people. They do not have to be a part of your world if they are not filling you up, because what's the point? And it's remembering that if you are a happier person or more positive, you will trigger people because you are being what they cannot. If that's who they are at that moment, it's not to say that is their way forward, but it is the way that they are choosing to be. But I kind of feel like all of this gossip energy, you're letting all those people control your life. So why? If you like to gossip about someone, it bring why are you bothering? It's just no point. So I'm kind of thinking, how about we ditch all that? We don't need that. How about we ditch that? Because that energy that gets put into that, what about if you put that energy onto you? What about if you put that energy into yourself, what you create, how you show up? And also, what about if you put that energy into talking to people about what they're doing? It's so funny because in a weird way, men gossip a hell of a lot too. Because have you heard them talking about football? Oh my God, X, Y, and Z, they did a goal, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't think that player should be here. I think that player, did you know what that player did? And it's like, you're just gossiping about footballers. And what about if that energy went into each other of talking about what's going on with you? Same thing. All this around, all the sport, all the celebrities, all the films, it's just made to create more gossip. And then we bring that into the gossip around our friends. I use that term loosely because I would argue you're not a friend if you're gossiping behind their back. What's the point? Feel free, if you know what the point is, let me know. But I don't see a point to it. And I also feel like we know who we want to be around. Our heart will know. So if you find that someone is talking behind somebody's back and you're like, I don't really like that, and that person they're talking about, I actually like them. This is weird. Now I don't know what to do and I'm feeling odd. You do not have to take on what they say. You get to decide through your own judgment and your own experience of who you want to be around. So this stems back to when I said it's okay if you go through seasons in your life of different people, because not everybody will fit you at the same time. And that is completely okay. And sometimes this can be really hard for people to be able to actually let go and move through their life. And they just it's almost like they blame, I've had this before, where they blame the person for being too happy, therefore they don't like them anymore. But to everybody they meet, they're like, basically, this person's horrible. When actually there's nothing wrong, and there was never anything wrong. It's just they've created something in their head and they're spreading it around. But if you're hearing that and thinking, yeah, but my experience is always, I feel good. I don't understand. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to understand it. You do not have to conform to any of that. You do not have to take on somebody else's judgment. If someone says to you, oh, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't go near that person, they're this, that and the other, but your dealings with that person has always been fine, you do not need to take on that judgment. And if you want to be friends with somebody who's saying X, Y, and Z, but they make you feel good in other ways, that's your judgment. And this is where being a sovereign being and realizing our own power is key, because you do not have to take on anybody else's judgment ever. And you don't have to accept gossiping about anybody else either. It's both things. When somebody fills you up with joy, with happiness, be near them. And if they don't and they continue not to, you don't have to be around them. If somebody says something about somebody who you like, you don't have to take it on. It is your choice. You do not have to, don't really have to do anything. Just let it go. I would argue that even sticking up for people behind their backs is just I wouldn't even go there. Just bypass it. That's probably the only time I'll probably say bypass something. Just don't give it the time of day. Not either way, because it's just pointless. It's silly gossiping. We want to be trying to live in this world and live together. And the amount of suffering and hurt there is in this world is diabolical. So the more we can raise ourselves up and raise each other up, that is what it's all about, because that is a ripple effect that just extends out into the world. And that's what we want to be doing, which my intention always fits that really well. So I'm going to love and leave you now with said intention, which will help you be in the life that you just absolutely love, because we are here now. Life is happening right now, and we want to be spreading love and joy to as many people as possible. So remember, as always, to lead through your life with your heart and to live with intention. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your friends and on social media. If you have the time to rate or review this podcast, I'd be ever so grateful. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Jolene Sensual Being. The links to my YouTube and to sign up to my mailing list will be in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.